Indictments were handed down today against 5 people connected to the former.
I guess part of it's genetic. I grew up on a farm. All the generations in my family that, at least since folks came over to this country, have been farmers and ranchers. So when they say it's in the blood, in my case, it really is in the blood. See if any of the deer stuck around. Yeah, there's 2 of them. They vanish in a hurry.
No kidding.
We bought this place in 1975, and I'm in the process of turning it over to my son, so we hope it stays in the family for a long, long time.
Fort McCavitt is one of the best restored Buffalo Soldier forts in the country. In the early 90s, we were actually able to turn these forts into summer camps for at-risk kids and teaching them the history of Buffalo Soldiers, you know, ex-slaves that performed heroically on behalf of American society after the Civil War. I grew up in a household that was active in the civil rights movement. My mother was a teacher in Catholic school, and she always had an interest in history, and our household was full of political talk all the time.
There was a very popular Democrat named Rick Perry. Karl talked him into becoming a Republican and running for agriculture commissioner.
They convinced Rick Perry to change parties and run against this radical liberal populist, as they called him, Jim Hightower.
Karl had put together the staff and the game plan to defeat Hightower, the research of the issues. Karl and I became experts on boll weevils, believe it or not, so we could talk boll weevil eradication and fire ants. Probably something we both don't discuss very much today, but we can.
In the midst of that campaign, an FBI agent all of a sudden starts investigating every Democratic office holder in the state of Texas. But the place where they focus is the Texas Department of Agriculture.
The indictments state the defendants illegally used money from federally assisted programs for the benefit of political candidates.
And it did appear to be so politically convenient. But then it was backed up, of course, by the FBI, the respected FBI. And if the FBI was looking into it and the FBI said there was something to it, well, by gosh. And that's, of course, where Agent Rampton came into play.
This agent was the same agent who investigated the bugging in Karl's office.
There were 2 older guys. What we paid them to do was to advise us on how certain laws were made 20, 30 years ago, because they had been there. And also they acted as a liaison with the traditional ag community that mistrusted Hightower. And they did a very good job at that.
They were hired as external consultants, and the 2 of them, of their own initiative, they thought, well, as long as we're out there, we're going to be traveling, let's go ahead and raise some money for Hightower. And that's precisely what they did.
If you look at what they got in trouble for, was having a consultant/employee who, on government time, allegedly asked somebody for a campaign contribution. Well, during your normal campaign season in Texas, that probably only happens accidentally about 1,000 times a day.
I didn't find out about the possibility that these 2 elderly gentlemen were pressuring people to give donations to Hightower until really toward the end of the cycle of when they were getting the donations. When I found out, I called them in. I put a stop to it. It ended. Obviously, that wasn't good enough. That wasn't good enough for the prosecutors, and that wasn't good enough for Karl Rove.
Karl frequently had information about the investigation that nobody else had. And there were subpoenas issued that Karl was tipping reporters off about before the subpoenas were issued. Reporters ended up calling the Agriculture Department and saying, hey, I hear so-and-so has been subpoenaed. Can you comment on that? And they'd say, we don't know what you're talking about. The subpoena would come out 3, 4, 5 days, a week later.
I think people that are jealous of Karl, to say that Karl could pick up the phone in 1990 and call the FBI and investigate the Agriculture Department, I always found is ludicrous.
At the time, you've told me that you've talked with...
When pressed about his contact with FBI agent Rampton, Karl Rove responded,
I had a conversation with Agent Rampton, I believe in June or July of 1990, and then I had a conversation with him in October, late September, early October of 1990, and then I think I had one early in the year with him.
There were people that we interviewed for the book who said that people were told by the FBI agent during their interviews, if you have anything that you think is of interest that's going on over here that's illegal, why don't you run it by Karl Rove and he'll let me know if it's worth me looking into.
It's easy to pick on Karl. But I mean, to say that Karl orchestrated that, which at the time everybody tried to do, never stuck, never saw it.
In this situation, a lot of time and effort had been expended in going after Hightower, trying to get rid of him as a political star in the Democratic Party. When that didn't happen, there had to be a result to make all that worthwhile.
Should anyone have forgotten the history of this vendetta, this matter was fully investigated by the state of Texas months ago in great detail. Impartial, non-political state investigators determined that there was no illegality.
The fact that these two guys were later actually convicted always struck me as one of those things where you push beyond reason on charges that normally would have been dropped, settled out of court, settled with a fine. There was just too much zeal in that case. It smelled rankly from the beginning.
I do think that the two fellows who spent time in the federal penitentiary as a result of that, that's one of the greater political prosecutions of all time.
Miller and McCrae each served 27 months in federal prison and together paid $71,000 in fines. The convictions ended their political careers. The consultants who solicited the funds were excused from prosecution due to age and ill health.
I was here in Dallas when the verdict was given, and I essentially wept that evening when that happened. I mean, it impacted me just that much, that these were people who were trying to make the state a better place, had the right values and interests, and then for something like this to happen to them just for political benefit, I was devastated.
Do you think Karl Rove has any sense of the personal toll that this kind of stuff takes?
I think that it's just like a general on a battlefield. It's it's a part of the business of doing battle, part of the business of doing war. So I suspect it's not of particular interest what has happened to Mike Miller and I. In fact, I would be almost positive that it's not of interest to Karl, and that's probably how you get up every morning.
And in fact, I suspect that that he gets a plug out of this, out of people believing that he played this kind of role, that he was actually able to put his political enemies in jail.
How did your parents feel about it?
Well, very supportive. Got me on this one. During the time of troubles, as I they both passed away. And I think it's quite likely that the stress certainly could have contributed to the. My mother died suddenly of a stroke in '92, and then my father died in '98. So it was during the time of the Troubles, as we used to call it, to adapt the Irish saying. that they both passed away. And so I think it troubled them greatly, although they were both very, very supportive, as my family has been throughout the process.
So you ruined two people's lives, and you got Rick Perry elected agriculture commissioner, which in the big scheme of things is not a big deal, except now he's governor of Texas.
God bless.